Hi guys, it's Circle M. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about a general ruck and combat setup for an unspecified duration of an unspecified event. I'm using the words unspecified to describe this because obviously if you know the mission and what you're going to be doing or what you've been planning to do in a certain setting, you would probably want to pack your gear appropriate to that. In fact, I would strongly recommend it. In this case, because I don't know for our hypothetical situation, this pack is packed somewhat generically. Obviously, this is mostly just to give you some ideas because you're going to pack what you need for when you need it. This pack is set up currently for a summer event. So this is not an indefinite, I'm going to stay in the field for the rest of my life bag, but this is a long-term stay. I don't know how long I'm going to be out there, so I've packed more generically. This is for a summer setup. Obviously, in winter, you're going to need more gear and gear specific to your environment unless you live in an environment where the weather changes very little from summer to winter. We will do in the future a winter loadout, but that will be a separate video. The video as it stands is probably going to be pretty long because I plan to go through every single item that's in the bag, hopefully give you some ideas about what you're going to need if you have no experience or very little experience in doing this. First things first, items that are carried on the body. I like to have schmog because this will ride over the back of my neck and give me a little bit of protection from the sling of this weapon. It also has a myriad of other uses, not just keeping the sun off of you, but for camouflaging purposes and hygiene. The hearing protection that you use is up to you. I personally really like these Sword & Supreme Pro X's. I think they are excellent, but they are a little on the expensive side. They of course pale in comparison to the cost of buying a set of Peltors, and I think these are roughly of comparable quality. If you are not running comms, you don't need Peltors, and even for those of you that do have a Balefang type radio, you probably still don't need the Peltors. That's a whole separate video. We can talk about that more in detail. Just make sure that you have good quality hearing protection. The rig itself that you wear is going to be specific to your needs. This is the same one that I did a different video on. I like it how it is, and I've used it enough that I know what I need. Obviously, you're going to have to pick what works for you. This is great. I also like this chest rig style of load-bearing equipment because it allows me to theoretically wear the bag or a different type of bag while also keeping this on. So I can have a combat load readily accessible and I can carry the ruck at the same time. The weapon you pick is going to be important in that it is a quality weapon that you are comfortable with using, that you have ammunition for. I would recommend, of course, a semi-automatic platform because that will give you the best ability to gain and maintain fire superiority in a combat setting. This weapon is as generic as I can get, and it happens to be my favorite weapon as well because it can do just about everything. It's not fantastic at one role or the other, but it does everything pretty well. It's suppressed with a short barrel. I have a quality weapon light on here, and my optic is set up not only for daytime use, but with this piggyback red dot sight, it is accessible for passive night vision aiming. I have the ability to add a D-ball or a PEC to this if I choose, but normally I do not because I believe with the proliferation of night vision that everyone is going to passive aiming, so that's how I've set this up. Additionally, here on the buffer tube, I've taped a range card which is calibrated to the ammunition that I'm using with the bullet drops here so I can be more accurate. All I have to do is just look and peek down and I can read those numbers to give myself better accuracy. Of course, I have a good quality sling on here as well because it's very important for freeing up your hands for administrative tasks as well as taking some of the weight of the weapon off your arm when you're carrying it. You can let that ride a little bit on your back and your shoulders. As we get into the ruck itself, you will see why I have stated in some other videos about how I don't like to carry or the idea of carrying body armor. That's because this is heavy enough by itself. You have the ruck, you have the weapon, you have your combat first line kit, and that easily by itself with what I've got here will add up to over 100 pounds. It doesn't take much to get really heavy really quickly, and this bag is packed as minimally as reasonably possible. So add your body armor to that and you're adding weight. I understand that there is a time and place for it, but for what I am planning for, I am not going to carry it unless the situation dictates. So we're going to go piece by piece with this bag, and I'll hopefully give you some ideas on what you might want to do. The bag that I've chosen to do this video on is the LBT that I did a review on previously. I like the bag a lot for what the features it has to offer. Honestly, for me, it would be a toss-up between this and the Molly 2 Ruck because I like both of them equally so. I think this one is better for a summer loadout from the standpoint that the frame that it uses will give you a little more air circulation on your back. So for a hot environment, this might be the way to go. As I start to unpack this bag, you'll see what I'm talking about, how I dislike the style of straps that are on these military bags. Unfortunately, in order to begin accessing stuff, I have to take it off, and it lets anything that I have strapped to the bottom flop, as well as having the top uncontrolled. So I would prefer, if you're a bag manufacturer and you happen to be watching this video, I'd prefer to have two sets of straps. The lid strap that's connected somewhere on the body, and then the bottom strap for your secondary compartment that's separate, so you don't lose control of every item in your bag whenever you undo the straps. I have a tarp here, and this tarp is a pretty large tarp, and the reason I have it is for building shelters. My plan when using this Ruck is to set this down somewhere like a patrol base and operate out of the bag, not be carrying the bag with me everywhere. And this can build a shelter large enough to have two people under it. So if you have you and a friend, only one of you in theory would need to carry the tarp and you'd be good to go. On the right side of the bag, I have a very large, long-term medical bag. I don't know how long we're going to be in the field for. I don't know what kind of things we're going to encounter. So I have just about every item in this bag for long-term field care. If we may be away from medical services for a time, this has more gear in it than the regular IFAC and can, in theory, sustain a patient for longer than just your immediate access care. This medical bag is also designed on a rip-away standalone system. So I can pop this off the bag. It has its own waist strap that can go around your waist or over a shoulder, and you can use this away from the bag, or if you have to ditch the Ruck for whatever reason, I can pull this off and not have to leave it behind. I can take it with me wherever I'm trying to go. Here down towards the bottom, this is my weapon cleaning kit with a weapon cleaning rag. You'll notice that I have it on the outside of the bag for a reason, and that's because inside of my weapon cleaning kit, I have a cleaning rod. This one specifically is a steel rod because if you get a stuck case, I can really quickly pull this off and I can use it to ram that stuck case out. Additionally, if I want to leave the Ruck behind and take the case with me, which I would if I was leaving the Ruck somewhere, it's easy to just pop it off and take it really quickly. Behind these Alice-style pouches, I have a hatchet. This one is actually brand new. I went down and got the $10 one from Harbor Freight with a fiberglass handle because the original one I was using was starting to show signs of weakness and failure, so I got a new one. We're going to try it out and see how it is. For how cheap it is, I think it's pretty good quality. I got a fiberglass handle instead of a wood handle because I don't want to risk this being compromised by rain or wet conditions that could ruin a wooden handle. I'm aware that it's bright yellow and it needs to be painted, but I included it because this is what I would be carrying if I were to pack this Ruck out. The advantages and disadvantages to these exterior packs are what makes or breaks this LBT bag for you if you're going to be using it. Here in this first one, I have stuffed 2 magazines and an MR rig. The reason I've done it this way is because I'm trying to distribute the weight of this ammunition a little bit as well as keeping my food relatively accessible. The ammunition is important because I don't know when I'm going to get a resupply. I have the 7 magazines, 1 in the gun and the 6 in the rig, but I have more ammunition stashed in this backpack because there may not be a resupply for me. I need to have enough ammunition to keep going for a while. Same thing with food. I have a lot of food in this rig that you may not normally carry if you were in, say, the Army, because you have a supply train to feed you. Here, as a regular filthy civilian, there is no supply train. You're on your own, so make sure you're carrying enough food. In the pouch below that one, I have another magazine. Notice that this one is carried in the front of the pouch because if you carry it in the back, it will be obstructed by the top pouch like I mentioned. And I have another MRE. And this doesn't have to be MREs. You can carry whatever foods you like. I just happen to have a lot of these and I personally like them, which is why I use them. Stuffed behind this topmost pouch, I have my tent stakes. And I have stakes of different sizes because they serve different purposes. These are very important for setting up a shelter. And because they're aluminum, they're pretty lightweight, and they work really well for the way I build my shelters. In this center main pouch, I carry my wet weather equipment. I carry it here because I want it to be readily accessible in the event that it does start raining. Getting wet is bad. So I've got my poncho ready to go. This is a large poncho, so it's big enough I can drape it over the top of the Ruck if for some reason I needed to do so. But I also have a large backpack cover, which is designed to cover the ruck, so I can cover the rucksack, I can wear my poncho, and I can be separate from it, and it will still be protected from the rain. Now I know what you're thinking, why would you carry a poncho and also the tarp? You can use your poncho as a rain shelter. You can set that up in like a hasty hooch configuration, so it seems a little bit redundant that you're carrying both a tarp and a poncho and a cover for your backpack. And I tell you that it's from experience that I do that. Having a shelter that you can set up that is standalone, where you can wear the poncho and go away from it, is really nice. As well as you may not have the time or ability to set up that hooch configuration to cover your bag, so having the cover to be able to throw over it is worth the wait, in my opinion. Here in this bottom pouch, I have my hygiene and rope. And the reason I've done this is because this pouch, being low and away from the body, is able to get the most leverage on the person who's carrying this bag. So I've put the lightest weight items that I can, as well as I need to access these. So I've got them here for this reason. I have a regular microfiber towel. This is useful for everything from wiping sweat off of yourself to cleaning the lenses on your weapons. Obviously, this rag is not used for cleaning the internals of the weapon. I have a special dedicated rag for that, and that's because I don't want to be wiping lead particles all over my face whenever I do a hygiene style wipe down. I have butt wipes in a plastic bag. It doesn't matter what kinds you get, just have something to be able to clean yourself after you use the bathroom. Wet wipes are, in my opinion, better than dry toilet paper, especially in the field, so you do what works for you, but this is my recommendation. Finally, in the bottom of the pouch, I have a couple 100 feet of 550 cord. You'll notice this 550 cord is not cut. And the reason for that is I don't know the length of what I'm going to need, so I have it so I can cut it as I need it in the field. You'll notice that while it looks like a rat's nest when I pulled it out, it is actually bound in such a way that it doesn't become a mess in the bag, and I can grab one end, I can pull it, and have the cord that I need. On the left side of the bag, you'll notice that it mirrors the right side, and this is done for balance primarily. I have an MRE in the pouch, and then I have 2 more magazines for combat sustainment set towards the back of the pouch to help keep the weight close into me. In the bottom, in the same fashion as the other side, I have a magazine that's set to the outside, so that way it can be accessed even when stuff is in this top compartment, and I have another MRE. Moving over from that, I have my entrenching tool. I really highly recommend, unless you have a very, very specific reason for not carrying one, that you have some sort of folding shovel with you. It is a very, very handy tool. This one obviously in very good condition because this is also a brand new shovel, but as long as you've got something, you're going to be better off than if you have nothing. It's my personal opinion that Ukraine has really shown us the value of having entrenching tools to be digging trenches, foxholes, fighting positions, and things like that. You really should be carrying a shovel with you. Moving to the top of the bag, I have, in the uppermost compartment, a pair of binoculars. Again, because this bag is set up for a generic mission, I don't know what we're going to be doing. I have the binoculars in here because they're very useful for long-range observation. And yes, while you can have a scope to look at stuff, it's really nice when you're doing sustained observation to have a lens in front of both eyes so you don't give yourself a migraine, headache, or eye strain when you're looking at something. In the next pouch below, I have a folding saw. This saw is pretty old and it's seen some better days, but it works really well, which is why I use it. Now I can use this to build a more fortified fighting position or do some other task that requires sawing. In the top pouch, I've got more MREs. 1, 2, 3. I am carrying a lot of food, and I'm carrying a lot of food because I've experienced what it is to not have food, and it is extremely unpleasant. When you are operating as a civilian, you are not going to have a resupply. I'm saying it again and again and again because it's important. You need to be carrying water, food, and a way to get more of both of those things. Underneath the top flap, I have my smaller assault bag. You'll notice that it has 2 magazines in it. The reason I'm carrying a second bag, like I stated previously, this bag is more like my house. I'm going to set this down somewhere, and then I would carry mission essential equipment in a smaller bag when I move to do whatever it is that I'm doing. I wouldn't want to carry the whole ruck with me if I could avoid it, which is why I have a second smaller bag in here. Inside the bag, you'll notice that I've packed it using the wet weather bag that I mentioned in my review video. That is partially to keep my stuff dry. It's also partially to keep my items from falling from the upper compartment into the bottom compartment. I personally believe that the way the divider was put in this bag is a flawed design, but It is what it is, and this is my fix for that. I am keeping my electronic power and battery in its hard case. I'm keeping this here, in a way it's double protected. It's in a waterproof case inside of another waterproof case because electronics are super important. Whether it's from the Ear Pro to the weapon light to your night vision, having your batteries protected in a suitable environment along with your sustainment gear to recharge those batteries is very important. Inside the wet weather bag, I now have my sleeping pad. This, when you're laying on the ground, will really give you a lot of comfort. This is the Climate Static 5. It is a fantastic sleeping pad. It's around $50 to $60, but it is worth every penny for how comfortable it is. Next, we have what some might consider to be a luxury item. You'll notice that it is also packed in another bag because I'm redundant. I hate my stuff getting wet. This is a hammock. Now, a hammock is not normally what someone would think of as being a tactical environment sleep system. You normally would be sleeping flat on the ground, as low as you can get, or you dig a slight depression into the ground so you can be as camouflaged as possible. In that case, I would use my sleeping pad. But if I'm in an environment that permits it, I would much rather sleep in my hammock because it's a lot cooler in the summer. This particular hammock does have a built-in mosquito net. If you don't have one, you can get the aftermarket add-on mosquito nets, or some of these hammocks are so cheap, it may just be worth it to just buy a brand new hammock that has the built-in mosquito net. Speaking of mosquito nets, I have an actual standalone mosquito net. Obviously, I can do it infantry style and sleep on the ground every night, everywhere I go, and just be miserable, but I don't have to do that. And if I did need extra space in the bag, I would start ditching items like the supplemental mosquito net and the hammock, but getting sick because a mosquito bit you, or just simply the annoyance of not getting a good night's sleep because bugs are eating you alive, is really miserable. So for how lightweight this is and for how cheap this is, I recommend that you carry a supplemental mosquito net because I can deploy this even if I'm just sitting in a high side watching something. This doesn't have to be for sleeping. Lastly, in the bottom of my wet weather bag is my cooking kit. I have 2 pots here. This also doubles as a water purification system. I can boil water in this to help clean it up so that I can have something to drink, as well as being able to cook food, potentially wild edible food that I may come across that's not just my MREs. It's my personal philosophy that if I can, I would rather eat from the field before I dig into my MREs, because eating in the field is uncertain. A food that you might have today, maybe you come across a bunny and you can eat that bunny, you may not have that tomorrow, but your MRE that is in your bag is always going to be there until you eat it. So I would recommend that you eat from the field first, if you can do it without being compromised, before you start breaking into your packaged food. The wet weather bag itself is larger than this initial top compartment, so if I need to waterproof extra gear or change the configuration of stuff, this bag is large enough to accommodate that. Here in the top compartment, I have a Camelback and 2 steel water bottles. These 2 steel water bottles are an important part of my survival plan because I can boil water in these. These are non-insulated bottles. Don't try to boil water in an insulated bottle. You're going to have a bad time. But I can have 2 of these full of water boiling in a fire, and I can make a lot of purified water relatively quickly, especially when I add my pots into the mix. The Camelback, which is in the top here, has the hydration routed through the zipper down to the strap so I can drink while I'm walking. Staying hydrated while you're on the move is very important. You may not have the opportunity to stop, open your bag, get water and drink. So having a full Camelback is very important. You can also have another Camelback that's resting on the top with the lid closed with a second hose running to you. It's going to depend on how much water you need and how frequently you're going to need it. Moving to the bottom of the bag, this standalone package is my survival and hygiene equipment. This is also set up on a breakaway system, so that way it can be grabbed away from the pack and moved if necessary. I have my hygiene items, toothbrush, a bar of soap, a rag, and medication for small stuff like ibuprofen and Benadryl. I have an entire Sawyer water filtration kit in the other side. The front compartment has an emergency blanket and candles. The internal compartment has a couple of snack bars, more candles, dry kindling, and other fire starting equipment. Now I know what you're thinking. Why would you have so much redundant fire starting equipment? And the reason for that is fire is your friend. Obviously, you have to be careful about when and where you do light fires that you're not giving yourself away, but fire is used to cook food and purify water, and those two things are probably most of what you're going to spend your time doing. I would prefer, if I was given the option, I would always boil water before I would use the Sawyer water filter. And the reason for that is that filter is a limited resource. I do not know if I'm going to get another one, if and or when that may ever happen. So I'm going to hold that filter in reserve because it will eventually run out. I'm going to boil water before I would go to using the filter if I could. An additional item of note, these filters are vulnerable in freezing conditions. Once you use it, you drink water through it, and it becomes embedded in the membrane. It is practically impossible to get that water back out. So if you're in freezing conditions and your water filter has water in it because you used it, and you let it freeze, that freezing water can break those fibers that are in that membrane, and you can end up drinking dirty water accidentally. So once you start using it and you're in winter conditions, instead of having it stand alone in your pack, you need to start carrying it in a pocket next to your body so that it doesn't freeze and break and become useless. In the bottom zippered compartment, I have items that are slowest of access, things that I need probably the least quickly. That's going to be a spare pair of footwear. Doesn't really matter what footwear you have, but having a spare pair is invaluable. That could be because you broke or ripped the sole off of the bottom of one of your shoes. It could be because the ones you wear got wet. Who knows? But having that extra pair is super valuable, so I recommend that you carry some if you can. In two smaller wet weather bags, I have, in this one, my whoopee, and in this one, spare clothes, socks, and underwear. I have the whoopee in the wet weather bag, even though it dries quickly, because if in some unforeseeable disaster, all of your stuff gets wet that you're wearing and your other wet weather bag is compromised, you can take the whoopee out of the bag, wrap up in it, and get at least a little bit of insulation. And I know you're saying, it's summer, it doesn't get that cold, why would you need that? It's because it does not take much cold weather, or it doesn't take much of a drop in the temperature for you to actually be at risk of hypothermia. A nice day that's say 65 and you've got a mild breeze can suddenly become very dangerous if it's 65 with darkness, right? No sunlight to warm you up, and you get soaking wet. With that breeze blowing over you, that can rob a lot of heat from you very quickly. So having something dry to put on is fantastic. The changes of clothes that you bring with you are going to be dependent on what you need for yourself. I have in this bag multiple changes of socks and underwear. I keep those on the top of the bag. Socks, of course, are first on top because that's probably going to be the thing that I'm going to change the most. And you're going to want to spend the money to buy good quality wool socks. It will help keep you from getting foot diseases. It'll help keep you warm if your feet get wet because wool does not lose its insulating properties when wet. And it'll help keep you from getting foot diseases because wool is naturally antimicrobial. Next, I have my underwear. I have multiple changes of underwear. I really recommend that you buy the moisture-wicking athletic kind to take that water away from your body. You don't want to get a rash. I also recommend that you buy the ones that have the long thigh on them, and that's to help prevent you from getting chafing. Chafing is really unpleasant, and when it happens, it's not going to go away if you keep chafing the same area day after day. And so the long thigh on the underwear can really help prevent that. Finally, in the bottom of the bag, I have the actual change of clothes itself. The clothes that you carry with you to change into don't really matter. It could be uniform, it could be regular civilian clothes, whatever it is, you're going to want at least one spare pair to change into. Some people carry 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I personally have found that I only need to carry one extra pair, and I'm aware that's pretty nasty, but it's the field. You're going to have to do what you're going to have to do, and changing clothes on the frequent is a luxury, not a necessity. That is it for the bag. You can see we have totally unpacked it. While it does not seem like that is a lot of equipment, and it really isn't. I've got a change of clothes, a couple extra changes of socks and underwear, a spare pair of shoes. I have food, water, and the sleep appropriate system. I've got the way to purify more water. I've got my weapon and ammunition. That's actually not a lot. You are going to be living very minimally when you are living out of a bag like that. But even with this minimalist setup here, this is still an incredible amount of weight to carry. Add your body armor to that, and you're only adding weight, or add, say, a luxury item to that, and you're starting to add weight to it. How many of you in a serious self-examination can actually put on 100 pounds of equipment and go walk for any significant distance? It is not very easy to do, and it requires an incredible level of physical fitness. So if you are able to do so, I would highly recommend that you start exercising and getting in shape, because you might be living out of your bag one day. Overall, I hope this was helpful to you guys. It was fun for me to pack my bag up just like I used to in the good old days, showing you what I've got in here and why. Hopefully it was really helpful to you to get some ideas, maybe stuff you might want to buy, stuff you might want to change. Of course, the best way to learn all this is to go out right now while you can in a non-austere environment and actually test what you have. Nothing is going to be better than getting out there and doing it yourself. Thank you again so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time.